You're listening to the I'm Busy Being Awesome podcast with Paula Engebretson, episode number 274. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, in a convenient turn of events that I'm just realizing as I kind of mapped out the episode, we are exploring a topic that essentially expands on what we've covered in the last 2 weeks about leaning in and letting things be hard by flipping it on its head. Okay, so in episode 272 and 273, we did this 2-part episode on what to do when we simply don't have the motivation to do the thing, right? When we just don't feel like it, and what we can do to put supports in place so we can move through that discomfort, move through the uncomfortable emotion, and make things happen. Now, toward the beginning of that 2-part episode, in episode 272, I highlighted a critical distinction between capacity and discomfort. Okay? There are times when we feel resistant to being in the discomfort of growth. We try to avoid the toddler tantrums in our brains, and we're in that I don't want to energy. Okay, and we kind of resist doing the thing. And our brains become very good at coming up with all of these compelling reasons why we should skip it, why we should put the thing off, when in reality, the best possible thing that we could do for ourselves is to put in the supports and help ourselves take action for that growth. Now, there are other times when our executive functions just do not show up to work. Okay, these are the situations when we are absolutely exhausted, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, all of the above. And today, what I want to do is focus on that latter situation. What about those times when it's not that there's just a toddler tantrum and I don't feel like it and I could really grow by leaning into the discomfort? What about those times when I genuinely don't have the capacity and I need a break? I need to step back. What do we do then? What do we do when we don't have energy in the tank? Because we've all been there, right? Something happens, things start piling up, the stress builds. If we're not careful, we, if you have a brain like mine, might find ourselves pushing even harder, trying to get ourselves to keep up with it all. Okay, so we're past our capacity and we start thinking, I got to push a little bit harder. I just need to do a little more. I'm almost done. I'll be able to rest after. I just need to finish this. And so today, as we think about this other side of the coin, when we are truly depleted, I want to offer the opposite approach of slowing down to honor your capacity. And the idea that slowing down to honor your capacity is actually more powerful than leaning in. And there is an art in knowing the difference between these two. Okay, there's absolutely an art in being able to identify for yourself when it's time to lean in and do the thing and when it's time to pull back and rest. And to help you identify that distinction for yourself, in today's episode, what we're going to do is dive into this powerful mindset shift, which is when things are hard and you're past your capacity, the answer is in softening. Okay? When things feel hard, we want to soften. So we're going to unpack what this means and why it is so important for those of us in the Busy Awesome community. And then, of course, I will also share some actionable strategies to help us start applying these approaches in our lives right away. Because again, for many of us, we fall into this camp of often wanting to push past our capacity and into burnout. Now, before we dive into the specific strategies, I'll first share a little bit about what inspired this episode. So I was away for the weekend, and if you've been listening to the podcast for a little while, you probably know that I have a hard time with transitions. And when I travel, I usually need 2 full days of transition time to kind of get back into my routine. The first day, I'm usually completely untethered, super spacey, just very out of it. The second day, I'm able to grab onto my routines a bit more. By day 3, I'm grounded. I'm locked back in. Well, this time around, I did not have any of that. There was a weird scheduling thing that just doesn't matter, but I had no transition days at all. In fact, I got back from my travels on a Monday at noon, and I had a call with my coach at 1. And then on top of that, I also didn't sleep very well at all when I was away. And for Paula Engebretson, no transition time and very little sleep is not a great combination for clear executive functioning, let me tell you. So I came back home, I had my call, and then technically it was a Monday. Monday is podcast day, which means I was supposed to sit down and record an episode. Let me tell you, that felt hard. I had this complex topic that had a lot of layers in it. I've been kind of mulling it over for a while. It's a process-oriented episode, and my brain was not having it. You know that emoji where the arms are like crossed in a no? That's kind of what my brain was doing. And so instead of trying to push through, right, just power through the discomfort, which would be my usual go-to approach, frankly, I decided, hold on, this is not what we do here. And I chose to soften. I gave myself permission to, first of all, wait a day. And then second of all, to pivot on the topic. In fact, as I just mentioned, I decided to use this exact experience that I am in right now as the inspiration for today's episode, because I knew I wanted to record an episode, but I also knew that it would not feel good for my brain, for my nervous system, if I forced myself to sit down and churn out this more process-oriented episode that I had been thinking about over the last few weeks. Not to mention, it just would not come across clearly for all of you. Not helpful, okay? So sometimes softening is not just about self-compassion and kindness, all of which, you know, I fully endorse, heck yes. But also, in addition, softening is about making thoughtful decisions that can help us pivot when it's necessary, right? That can help us pivot so we're able to do the things that we want to, but in a slightly different way so that we're not burning ourselves out. Now, let's talk a little bit about why we do tend to push ourselves harder when things start to feel hard. Why do we do this? I mean, how many times have we told ourselves, I just gotta power through, I just gotta get this done. If I can just get this done, then I'll be fine. Then I can rest. After this, then I'll be able to ... For a lot of us, again, especially those of us with ADHD and ADHD tendencies, it can seem like we are always behind. We are just living in perpetual behind. We are always playing, quote unquote, catch up. One of my clients describes it as needing to clear the decks. And since we're often in this belief of being behind, we also tend to think that doubling down is the solution. But the problem with doubling down, with pushing harder when we are already past our capacity, is that it leads to burnout, frustration, resentment, and let's be real, often a whole lot of avoidance. We don't actually finish the task because the demand is too great and we just don't have the capacity to do it. We keep putting it off and then shooting on ourselves and forcing ourselves, but then avoiding it. And we are in this push-pull tug of war. The reality is this: being hard on ourselves never makes things easier. Bruno agrees. Being hard on ourselves does not make a hard thing easier. If anything, it makes it more difficult. When we are hard on ourselves and we force ourselves to push through, it often makes things harder overall. So today I want to challenge that belief and explore what it can look like to soften. How we can soften when we are past our capacity to help us move forward. So what does softening actually mean? What do I mean when I say soften? What does that look like? Well, first of all, let's clear something up, okay? Softening does not mean we're just giving up. we're being weak, we are being quote unquote lazy, which is what my brain always wants to say. Okay. What softening means is being compassionate and understanding and working with our current capacity so that we can do the things we want to do. It means checking in and giving yourself the support that you need. When things get hard, it's often a sign that we need support, and that support can come in many different forms, including support from ourselves. So with that in mind, softening might look like giving yourself permission to take a break. It could mean adjusting your expectations for what needs to be done right now. Or it could be taking a different approach to that situation entirely, something very different. Softening is all about recognizing that sometimes the pressure that we put on ourselves is the very thing that's making that task feel impossible. Okay, we put so much pressure. I just got to work harder. This is such a hard thing. Let me just push through. No. What if we soften? Okay, what if instead of tightening the screws and making our lives even harder, what would happen if we loosened them a bit? Now, some of you may hate this idea so much. There might be part of your brain that's like, are you kidding me? This sounds terrible and will not work. If that is you, let's talk about some science, huh? Okay, let's talk about why this approach of softening is actually helpful for a brain. When we are stressed, when we are overwhelmed, our brain tends to shift into survival mode. It shifts into fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Okay? This is the brain's way of protecting us when it perceives a threat. And often in our lives today, those threats look like looming deadlines, a super packed schedule, a never-ending deadline-driven to-do list, okay? Requests from lots of different people. The problem is that when we are in survival mode, the part of our brain that's responsible for higher level thinking, the prefrontal cortex, okay, that part of our brain essentially goes offline. So we lose access to the part of the brain that helps us think clearly and make decisions and problem solve and support our emotions. So instead of being able to logically assess the situation and break things down and help ourselves take step by step, we instead get stuck in that stress cycle where everything seems impossible. The more we push ourselves into this state, the more entrenched we become. Okay? The more we get stuck in that stress response. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, I was about to give this analogy as if I've done it, but I'm going to say it's kind of like how I imagine trying to drive through quicksand. I have never tried to do this, but I'd imagine it's like trying to drive through quicksand. The harder we press on the gas pedal, the deeper we sink. Okay? This is where softening comes in. When we allow ourselves to rest, to let go, to soften our expectations, to even take a short break, we are signaling to the brain, hey, there's no immediate threat here. It's okay. I got you. Your nervous system has a chance to regulate, to calm. And when we're able to do that, the brain, the prefrontal cortex, is able to come back online. It's like we hit reset on the router, and now the brain can come back online. And that part of the brain that handles our executive functions, right? The planning, the processing, the decision-making, our executive functions, they can come back. This is where the ability to make decisions, to tap into creativity, to problem solving can support us because we allowed ourselves to take a break, to reset, and invite our prefrontal cortex back. So by softening, we're not just being kind to ourselves, which honestly, that's a great enough reason in and of itself. So in addition to being kind to ourselves, we're also resetting our brain to work with us instead of against us. So we're not just sinking faster into the quicksand. We can think more clearly. We can plan more effectively. We can tackle our tasks with greater ease when we allow ourselves the rest we need when we've gone past our capacity. So in short, softening when we are past our capacity doesn't just feel better, okay? It makes us more capable of doing the things we genuinely want to do because we are operating from that place of calm and clarity and focus rather than stress and overwhelm. So let's talk about how we can do this. How might we start softening with ourselves? Let's talk about a handful of different strategies. I have 5 today. There are certainly many more, but for now, let's talk about 5. So the first strategy is to notice the signs of stress in your body. Okay, so the first step is recognizing when you are feeling overwhelmed. Is your body tense? Is your mind racing? Are you telling yourself you should be doing more? You should be getting more done? Are you running yourself past capacity? Is your tank empty? These are all signs that it's time to soften. You might also focus a bit on your energy levels. What do you notice when you check in with your level of energy? So we're thinking about our stress levels, whether we have a racing mind, our energy levels. You could set a reminder on your phone, do a quick body scan, check in a couple of times a day. Notice how you're feeling physically, emotionally, mentally. You could even track your energy fluctuations. That was weird. Energy fluctuations? That sounds so weird to me right now. Fluctuation. You know when you say a word too many times and then it doesn't sound like a word anymore? Track the fluctuations in your energy throughout the day, okay? So use maybe a simple rating system, like a 1 to 10. And then note, how high or low is your energy at this moment? Is it feeling full? Is it feeling depleted? If you notice significant dips in your energy, that might be a cue to soften, to recalibrate. You can just jot it down in a notebook. You could use an app. I use an app called Dailyo that I like a lot. But using something to check in and see how you're feeling. We want to start noticing what is actually happening in our bodies so that we can tell the difference between when we are relaxed and clear and able to do the things versus overwhelmed, past capacity, burnt out. How does that actually feel in your body? What is happening in your mind? Okay, so let's make note of that. Number 2, give yourself permission to pause. Now, your brain might not want to. Your brain might tell you, are you kidding me? Pausing? We don't have time for this. Taking a break is unwarranted. You haven't done anything yet today. Or you're just being lazy. Again, that's my brain's favorite phrase. It's just lazy. If your brain ever loves to offer different iterations of thoughts like this, I offer you to check in and question them. Okay? How is it possible that intentionally pausing to take a break is actually a super smart move to help you recharge and reset so that you can show up and do your best work? How is it actually the most effective way to do this? Can you find any evidence where that's been true for you in the past? I bet you can. So what might it look like to build in a few breaks throughout the day to practice this softening? To use that time to check in with yourself, to take some deep breaths, to reset. You could incorporate these micro breaks when you're switching tasks or between emails or right before a meeting. Okay, the idea is to give yourself these mini resets, these little breaks to reduce the tension before it builds up. And similarly, if you need a longer pause, what might that look like? Do you need to take the afternoon off? Do you want to call up your sister and ask her, hey, can you please take the kids for dinner because your wife is out of town for work, and if you have to hear mom, what about this one more time, your brain is going to melt right out of your head. Okay? What kind of break might you need when things are hard? Whether you're solo parenting or you've been pulling late nights or you haven't had the transition time you need or you're in the luteal phase of your cycle, what would it look like to soften in either the micro or the macro? Or both. I vote for both. Number 3, adjust your expectations. Okay. Sometimes the hard part isn't actually the task itself, but all the expectations that we've put on top of said task. and how we do it and what it quote unquote should look like. This was me with the podcast, right? I needed to soften my expectations. And I did that by asking myself, hey, what if we don't do the podcast on Monday? What if we do it on Tuesday after you've had a night of sleep? Sounds good. And what if I chose a topic that feels front and center for me, so it's easier for me to talk through it rather than really locking in that process approached episode that we've been thinking about but didn't have mapped out yet? Could we do that one in a couple of weeks after you've recharged? Yeah, that sounds way better. Okay, so can we work with that? Ask yourself, what would easy look like? Or what's the simplest version of this task that still gets the job done? What is the point of this task or this project? Can I focus only on that main point and then let the rest fall away for now? Give yourself permission to do the B or the B- work. Or maybe you reframe your objective with a focus on progress rather than completing the thing. Maybe you ask yourself, okay, well, am I able to sit down for 30 minutes to work on this thing? I know I wanted to get the whole thing written, but that does not feel available. What does feel available is 30 minutes of it. Am I willing to sit down and work on this for 30 minutes to take some action, to move the ball forward, to move me closer to the goal? So instead of thinking about completing the task perfectly, can we aim for taking the first step, knowing that we're honoring our capacity? And that as we do so, we're also allowing our energy to return so that we can do more when we have the energy and the capacity and the clarity to do so. The fourth way that I love to practice softening is act as if you're talking to a friend. Now, I know you've heard this before. You're probably rolling your eyes, but I really think it's powerful, okay? If you're feeling stuck and you're like, I don't know what it looks like to soften, what? I don't do that. Or I don't know how to make this easier. It just has to be done this way. Okay, what would it look like if your very best friend, someone you love dearly, came to you navigating the same thing? What would you tell them? You know they're feeling exhausted, they're overwhelmed, they've completely gone past their capacity. It is very clear this is not a toddler tantrum, I just don't feel like it moment. It is not that. They are drained, okay? What would you offer to them? What would you suggest to help them move through this? Chances are you would benefit from the exact same thing. And then building on this, the last step that I want to mention today as we soften toward ourselves and our situations is to recognize our wins. Again, probably no surprise here. This is a theme that you will hear me say all the time in the work that we do, including the exact opposite topic last week when we want to lean in and do the hard thing. Okay? It is always so important to recognize your wins and your progress. Doing so is what allows us to build that momentum and start rewiring our neural pathways to recognize our growth and to recognize our progress and to stay connected to that growth mindset. All of which are key components in helping us maintain our forward momentum, especially when things feel challenging. So at the end of the workday or at the end of a working block or at the end of your day as a whole, take a few minutes to reflect on your wins, big or small. Recognize them, celebrate them, allow yourself to feel proud. And if you want a guided way to do this, do check out my Count Your Wins journal. I will link to it in the show notes. It walks you right through this. But whatever approach you use, I highly encourage you to use it, to pause and celebrate your wins, acknowledge your progress. This is such a powerful component in helping us shift our focus from what we didn't do, that we could have done more, to what we did accomplish, to how we are moving forward, which fuels our momentum even further. And especially so once we've fully recharged our batteries. So how can we start weaving this into our everyday routines? Okay, well, as I mentioned, the key is recognizing that softening is a practice. Okay, it's not something that happens overnight. It might feel super uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to being hard on yourself to get you to do anything. If you are in the habit of pushing yourself and forcing yourself to get the work done, this is going to feel very different. But also, the more we practice softening and seeing the positive impact, the more natural it will become. The beauty of softening is that it can show up in so many different ways depending on what your days look like, where your energy is, what your needs are. So allow yourself to start small. Maybe today it's giving yourself permission to take that 5-minute break when you're feeling overwhelmed and to breathe. It may not seem like much. Your brain's like, what? That's it? It doesn't count. Yes, it does count. Because that's the start of learning to notice your nervous system when it's past its capacity and taking care of it. By allowing yourself to breathe, you're taking care of yourself and you're helping shift your mindset toward giving yourself what you need when you need it. When you start practicing this art of softening and you become more attuned to your body's signals, you're going to notice when you're feeling stress or tension, and also when it's time to recalibrate. You'll begin to notice those dips in energy and see them as a cue to pause, to recharge, to reset. You might also try, as I mentioned earlier, incorporating this act of softening in moments of transition, okay? It can be really powerful as a practice woven into the transitions of tasks. So for example, after finishing one project and before jumping into the next, take a moment to pause. Take a deep breath. Maybe go for a brief walk around the block or sit out on your back patio. These small, mindful moments can make a significant difference in your day. And then also, I offer this to all of you as much as I offer it to myself. Give yourself grace when things don't go as planned, okay? Part of practicing the art of softening is learning to let go of that perfectionism and that rigidity. Some days, despite the best of our intentions, things will not go as expected. Maybe we have lower energy than we thought we would, or we didn't accomplish everything on the list because we underestimated how much time the thing takes. Or maybe your brain wants to try and use this episode against yourself, and you start beating yourself up for beating yourself up. You start beating yourself up for not remembering to soften. And you're like, oh, I was supposed to do that and I didn't. Why couldn't I get it right? Nope. No, thank you. Nope. Okay. I see you. I get it. That's why I'm laughing, because I do it too, but we're not going to do that. Okay. We're using this for us. In these moments, instead of getting frustrated or beating ourselves up, let's take a beat. Let's recognize that this is part of the process and give ourselves that permission to pivot, to adjust, to take things at the pace that we have capacity for in this moment. So as we wrap up today, I want to, again, repeat this reminder that I've been thinking about quite a bit over the last few days. When things feel hard and we're past our capacity, it is not a sign to push harder. It is a sign to soften. It is an opportunity to soften. When we create the space we need to rest, to adjust, to breathe, we come back more focused and ready to do the things that we genuinely want to do each day. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for us this week. And if you are ready to take these concepts and apply them to your life, if you are ready to learn how to work with your ADHD brain in a way that works best for you, I invite you to check out today's show notes, where you can learn more about how we can work together, both in my small group coaching program, We're Busy Being Awesome, and in one-on-one coaching. Also, if you want to learn my simple step-by-step approach to locking in a routine and making it stick, be sure to check out my free course called the ADHD Routine Revamp. You can tap through the link in the show notes or head to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/routine to sign up. Until next time, keep being awesome. I'll talk with you soon.